Acton Finance Committee to order. First order of business is to introduce a new associate, Christine Russell, who's seated at the far right. It's customary for the new associates to recite the preamble to the town charter. Not sure there is one, actually. Welcome. We are at the moment a 7-member committee in terms of full members, and we still have 2 associates. The moderator and I are working on filling the vacancies, but the only progress we've made so far is Christine. All right, with that, I'll ask for public participation. Sir, do you have anything to bring before the committee? Okay. All right, then we will move to an update of the district master plan status. Amy Krishnamurthy would have done this, but is busy planning a meeting tomorrow night. So.
That's John Benson's shocked face.
All right. So with that, I will turn it over to our representative on the district master plan study group, Jason, to go through the presentation.
Thank you very much. The first thing is the District Master Plan Review Committee is all but wound down. We do not have any scheduled meetings left. The recommendation of the District Master Plan is due to go to the school committee not tomorrow, but I believe the next school committee meeting. Tomorrow I believe will be appropriately chock-a-block with its own agenda and does not need to look at this at this time. Some of the information that's in here has changed in the sense of we have made some determinations on what is going to be recommended and what's not, but I don't want to steal the school committee's thunder, so I will try and put my thumb on the scales here, but I'll also try and be as impartial as possible. So this was the presentation that was given to 13 different public forums in both towns, a total of 13 different public forums in both towns. The objectives of this were to describe different projects that came out of visioning committees and to get the feedback. Unfortunately, you can skip that elicit feedback. It's closed now. So this all started with the existing condition study that everyone's come to know and love, which resulted in that $110 million bogey if we were to fix everything. $120 million bogey if we were to fix everything. Remember, fixing everything just as it is the capital improvement plan. It is important to remember you cannot just throw out the capital improvement plan if we do go down the path of building a single school or a single twin school or a single building, because there are needs that are still need to be met by the other schools in town. The 3 buildings that were found to be most deficient, both in structure and in space, were Douglas, Gates, and Conant. So there were a bunch of different workshops in getting this up and running. There are 6 preferred options that came out of this. They left the 6 options plus the SIP only or the status quo plan as well. These are all the steps here. Draw attention to December 4th is the date that has been set for the special town meetings in both towns. Okay, so 6-2, the building committee has indeed been formed. I believe they are still looking for a member of the community who has construction experience, was the last I heard. So the charge of the subcommittee was to come up with what of the options should be eliminated. Before we go through the 6 options, we do want to just hang a lantern on some of the important characteristics that differentiate the different options. Size of school. Do we want to build single schools? Or do we wish to continue with a twin school as was already done in the Parker Damon building? What is the appetite for a potential triple school? Also, playing with the, playing is the wrong word, making changes to the grade configuration. You'll see quite a few references to the ECC An ECC, the Early Childhood Center, is where the preschool program that is currently in the administration building would get pulled out of the administration building, and kindergarten classes from all of the existing elementary schools would be brought into the one new school. Other grade configurations are what's leaving things as the K to 6 that we have now. If there is an ECC, that would lead to a 1 to 6, first to 6th grade configuration. There's also a conversation around a 1st to 5th grade and converting what we currently have with the nomenclature of a junior high school and turning it into a middle school, a 6 through 8 instead of a 7-8 junior high. Okay. A little more detail on the ECC. There are actually a lot more pros and cons than are what are on this slide, but this is just to get people's minds flowing towards this topic. One of the clear pros is that this pulls the pre-K program, which is currently in the administration building and is in by no means ideal space for that level of education or instruction, and it also pulls all the kindergarten students into the new school. This frees up the elementary schools to have more segments in their elementary school, easing overcrowding at the elementary schools. It consolidates specialized services so that currently there are students in need of services both at Blanchard and at the administration building. This would centralize all of the pre-K classrooms into one space. Obviously, with the consolidation of the specialized services, it also allows for greater collaboration between pre-K and K teachers. It allows for young kids to be in the same space for a longer period of time before moving on to their elementary school of choice. Some of the cons to this are that this would take out both pre-K and K from Boxborough. I do want to just make a special point right now that this does not violate the regionalization agreement for hometown choice, because K is not mandated. So that has been brought up numerous times. So this is still a legitimate choice. It adds another transition for students that do not necessarily go to a pre-K program. So you're going to be in the ECC for a year or two, and then, or potentially only a year if you go to one of the private nursery schools, pre-K schools. And it reduces the collaboration of kindergarten to first grade teachers. It can hinder that handoff. Just one other con I want to throw on there, because Shelley wanted me to make sure I mention it. This does have some impact to the Reading Buddies programs at some of the schools. I'm just throwing that in there so I don't get yelled at. Okay, one of the other big grade change considerations that was brought up is making a middle school. Pros of this, you can have the junior high team model. You have 3 years in a school rather than just 2 years in a school, so that your time at R.J. Gray is longer. More collaboration with that level of teachers. This also right sizes elementary schools. The cons to this are that the middle school would be ginormous, and the principal of the junior high said that if we did this to him, we would find him under a chair sucking on his thumb in the fetal position. This may also delay the time to address the elementary school problems, because the first letter of intent that we sent to the MSBA did not include or did not specifically call out the R.J. Gray building as the primary subject of the letter of intent. So we would have to forfeit a year, at this point 2 years of MSBA interest. It didn't go back to start it again. That said, there is definitely a lot of conversation about this might be something we as a town wish to do, especially in a so-called second round, which I'll get to a little more in depth later. But again, Andrew did beg us, if we decide to go towards a middle school versus a junior high route, that maybe we consider having 2 middle schools go 5-2-1 rather than 6-1-1 for our grade configurations. I think that covers that slide. Okay, phases and time to completion. You know, this is more of the honest to goodness logistics that matter when going on a plan like this. If you build one, it's approximately a 7-year project. If you want to have MSBA involvement, every time the MSBA is involved, you cannot have 2 concurrent projects, so you have to complete the one before you move on to the second. So if we were to serially go back to the MSBA, this could potentially be a 21-year project. So number of phases do matter. One phase is obviously faster. Multiple phases provide flexibility, especially if, God forbid, our enrollment numbers are wrong, and I will not harp on that right now. And then the other thing to keep in mind is the more phases it takes, the more the cost will be, because things only get more expensive as time goes by. And I also sincerely hope, this is just a side note, I sincerely hope in 7 years interest rates are a lot higher than they are now. Thank you very much. The other thing to keep in mind is we always have to continue to maintain the buildings we have. We always have to continue to provide an appropriate level of service in all the schools, which means the longer we delay, the more the SIP costs are for the buildings that are yet to be addressed. Okay. Okay, so part of this is if we build a twin or triple school on the Gates property, which has been deemed to be the best site currently, although that is subject to change if there is something in the discovery phase after we get design funding. If we have a twin or triple school, then that actually could theoretically reduce the number of school programs. That happens if there's an ECC. If you bring in an ECC to one of the new schools, then one of the other school programs, there would be one less of the school programs, and the remaining school or the remaining schools would potentially have to have tweaks to their educational philosophy. Okay. There is definitely overcrowding. I would refer you to the Dora Whittier report. I am sympathetic to Bob's statement that there wouldn't be overcrowding if the state did not reassess the square footage required per student, but that critique notwithstanding, Bob, in the eyes of the existing condition study, overcrowding is an issue. There are appropriate instructional space issues, art in the hallway, music on a cart, that type of issue, or inappropriate, or rooms that are not necessarily appropriate for the type of special needs education that are required. Trying to get, there is a expectation in the education community that the right size for a school is 400 to 500 students, and then obviously we'd have to pay attention to timing and phases. I will hurry up and try and get to the options. So the first of the options is to build, and this is a 2-phase option. The first phase is to build a new twin elementary school. In this instance, it would be a K-6 in the beginning, and then in phase 2, it would be adjusted down to 1 to 5, because the second phase is to renovate the Conant School and turn it into an ECC. Obviously, 2-phase program, 14 years, unless we decided to pay for the renovation of Conant on our own, which is being advocated by one of the ex officio members on the committee. I'm not sure that the town has the appetite to build a brand new twin school and take on at full cost a renovation of the Conant School. One of the cons on this one that has been raised numerous times is that this would mean that the pre-K and K students in Boxborough would have to go all the way to Conant. So for that reason, this is not necessarily at the top of the list. Again, I'm not supposed to put my thumb on the scales as to what will and what will not be referred to the school committee, but I would suggest that this is not the top of the list. The second option is to build a new twin school right from the start, whereas one half of the new twin school would be an ECC, and then the second phase would be to either drastically renovate or completely rebuild the Conan School as a second phase. This would decrease the number of school programs down to 5, just like the previous one. Again, 2 phases, 14 years. We've been accepted in phase 1. We'd have to go back at the apple for a second bite of the apple out in phase for the second building. And I would be very cautious about looking at these costs. I think they're a moving target, personally. I would put my thumb on the scale that you would want to take a nice long look at this option. This has definitely got support. And if I were a betting man, I would expect this to be one of the options that get referred to the school committee. The third option is a new triple school, which is right at the limit of what the the Gates property can take. It would be all 3 schools, Douglas, Gates, and Conant, collapsed into one new building. It would have an ECC in it as well. This is the only one and done project on the entire list. We did get the feedback from the 13 outreach committees, as well as the very nice presentation of this that Christina did much better than I'm doing right now, that's been on repeat on ActonTV. We did get results from the 288 surveys, respondents to that survey. And one thing that I found very interesting, and I do not know how to reconcile this, I really don't, one of the single highest desires on the part of the town is to have a one and done, and one of the most reviled things on the part of the members of the town is to have a triple school with that many students in it, in the same place, in the same space. So those two are, dare I say, mutually exclusive, but those were the only clear winners from the surveys that you're going to. We'll see the raw data from the surveys when that gets published in the next week or so. This is clearly hated by the town, even though it's the only one and done option in there. Option number 4 was to start by renovating the junior high and turning it into a middle school. I believe I've already discussed the pros and cons. The cons of this, the pros are that you take the pressure off all the other elementary schools by consolidating, by taking the 6th grade and putting it into that into the RJ grade building. Main con is it is an enormous building, an enormous number of students in the building. The other thing is we would probably need to do a brand new MSBA application. There is not strong support to do this now, although there were a good number of people who were intrigued at the concept of potentially at some point moving to a middle school model instead of a junior high model. So I would say this is probably not going to happen this time around, but might become a live exercise if there is a potential phase 2 to what the town does. Okay. Option number 5 is to serially go through and truly renovate these buildings. This is the hardest one to explain because it's too easily confused with the status quo or the SIP only. The main difference between this and the SIP only, in SIP only, you cannot, the plan is not to change the buildings. It does not rip off the modulars and put on permanent structures. It just brings things up to code. Whereas this is serially going through and truly rebuilding, rejiggering, renovating the building to meet the educational requirements that the MSBA and the school committee are looking for. This is the longest project, longest option with 3 phases. I would recommend, I would say that there was not a lot of support for this option either from the school committee or from the town writ large. Option 6 is another two-phase project where we start with a twin school, and this is a twin K to 6 school in phase 1, and phase 2 is a new building for just that one K to 6 elementary school. This does not, as originally envisioned, this does not address the pre-K at the administration building. I can say that this option has been amended in the DMPRC to make sure that that if they do build the twin school as the first phase, that they would bring in the 8 to 10 classrooms required to meet the pre-K for the entire district. So, as was originally presented to many of the forums, this has changed and has been amended to make sure that this becomes a building that can pull the pre-K buildings out of both, pre-K programs out of both Blanchard and the administration building. There are people on the committee that do not like this. They're saying it's a backdoor triple school. I personally would like to refer to it as a 2.1 or a 2.25 building because it's just 8 to 10 classrooms. It's not another, 24 to 30 classrooms. This may be the path of least resistance. This does not have a loss of school, does not have a decrease in school programs and school philosophies. I would say, though, that in the studies that we got back, the change in the number of school programs was nowhere near as contentious as any of us thought it would be. And that was a data surprise to me. So now, again, there are only 288 respondents to this survey, which I realize everyone was supposed to sit through a half-an-hour presentation before they do the survey, but by contrast, they received 2,600 responses to the survey about changing the start times to the schools. So it is possible that maybe our outreach efforts did not reach as many people, or perhaps there's a greater level of apathy towards this than I would have naturally recommended, since this has a direct impact on everyone's taxes. So this is the other option that I suspect you will probably see at the school committee level. And then the last option is the SIP only. This is hated by the overwhelming number of respondents and by the school committee as well, and arguably may end up costing us a lot of money in the long run, even though it appears to have the lowest cost up front. Please remember, this is a Band-Aid on the buildings. This is not rebuilding a building with a 50-year lifespan. This is just going through and trying to patch up the buildings without making any changes to the educational spaces and structures. Where do we go next? The DMPRC has made its recommendations. The school committee will receive the report in the next 2 weeks. December 4th, mark it in your calendar. We'll all be at our town meeting voting design funds. I do want to take the time right now to drive home that building a building with the MSBA is a partnership. This is not something where we get to go build what we want to build and present a bill to the MSBA and say, yeah, you told us you'd pay us 45%, we want our money. The MSBA is involved at every step of the way. They're going to quadruple check our enrollment numbers. They're going to make sure that the buildings meet the educational requirements. I did mention a 45% number, and since I mentioned it, I have to be very clear about what that base reimbursement rate is. That is the starting point That is not the expected final number from the MSBA. Any tweak that we make to the building plan that the MSBA is not fully on board with can and probably will be excluded from the reimbursement level. So for example, if we decide to build a new twin school and the MSBA agrees on a gym size of X square feet, and we decide to build a gym of X square feet, X plus 20% of square feet, then we can expect not to get money back for that extra 20%. Similarly, if we decide to close the administration building and bring all the administrative offices into a new building, administrative offices are not part of the reimbursement rate. So our 45% number will go down. I believe it is very important for us to keep reminding the town members that this is a partnership with the MSBA and we don't get to just build what we want. And secondly, that the base reimbursement rate is a best case scenario. It's not a guarantee. Because I don't want to be yelled at the end of this saying you promised us 45% and it came back at 41 or 38 or whatever it comes back at. So we do need to be very careful about that. The plan currently is to bring a small number of options to the towns for December 4th and ask for design money. That design money is to verify that the Gates property is indeed the right place to build, that it's got the right space, I'm sure this is going to come into the sewer conversation there, Dave, so good luck with that one. If you choose to be on that. Let's see, I lost my train of thought. Okay, so we're on for December 4th, basically, is the main thrust of that one. Oh, so yeah, the money that we'll be asking for in December will get us the design funding, and then we will have to vote again as two towns on whichever final building plan we choose to, we meaning the school committee, chooses to go with. And I hope I didn't take too much time. Just out of my own curiosity, I know, Bob, you were at the senior center, and I know, Christine, you were at one of the ones in RJ Gray. Is this the first time everyone's seeing this, or has everyone been glued to ActonTV and seen Christina present it much more smoothly than I ever could? You saw it in Boxborough, great.
I read all of them online.
Great. Great. You went to Boxborough? Okay, good. Does everyone feel they have a good sense of the different options and see what's at play for the different options? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Questions? Bob?
I'd like to talk about the December 4th meeting. As I understand it, there would be multiple options, at least two options to go before that meeting?
So we're actually trying to shy away from being tied down to two options. What we're trying to put forward is that the sense of the committee is to build a twin school in the first phase, that is definitely the case. There is strong support in the committee and from the community feedback for building a twin school to address as much of the Doran Whittier bogey as we possibly can in the first phase. Whether or not that twin school is 2 K-6s or is a 1-6 in an ECC, that is not a settled point. So probably what's going to be brought to the December 4th meeting is we are interested in building a twin school. We would like to investigate the feasibility of a twin school K-6 and the feasibility of a twin school 1-6 with an ECC to see if the traffic adjustments, the different release times for an ECC versus 2 twin schools being released at the same time would have an impact in the overall cost of the project.
But that that presupposes a single motion before town meeting or two different motions?
It presupposes a single motion to ask for design funding for a twin school, whereas the final plan for what that twin school would be would have to be determined during the design funding phase and would have to be voted, that final plan would have to be voted upon at the time of the override.
Okay, and what is the mechanism if the towns have a different view of the appropriateness of the motion, so that one votes yes and one votes no?
I honestly don't know. I suspect that would be a very unpleasant situation.
Well, I think that's perfectly true, but the question is, from a mechanical sense,
From a
what's the next step?
mechanical sense, if one town or the other votes it down, it is dead. And we would have to go back to the MSBA and start over from scratch.
Fine.
Whether or not that causes any larger issues, I can't speak to.
Okay.
But it would kill the existing invitation to partner with the MSBA.
Okay, thank you.
So there's going to be multiple options presented, but only a motion to fund the design of a twin school? Am I hearing this right?
That is correct.
We have clickers now with 4 buttons. Why can't we just have 4 options?
Because
Yeah.
both towns have to agree on the exact same thing.
Oh, they don't have clickers, yeah. So any option that you just went through that doesn't have a twin school is off the table?
Currently, that is correct.
Okay. We'll continue. Mike?
Yeah, I think you have to be careful with MSBA because the size of their pie that they have available to distribute to the communities could be a variable based on, you know, the fortunes of the Commonwealth change. Right now, they're not looking so good. It could affect the size of that pie. The other variable is the number of towns that are looking for, you know, have a building program that, you know, determines, you know, their piece of that pie. So what's left for the town of Acton could be in question. Plus the 45% could be, I think, as you said, is a best case scenario. But I think if you follow all their guidelines, design only what's the MSBA will allow, or, you know, meets those criteria, you know, I think 45% is still quite optimistic. As an example, with Minuteman, I think our reimbursement rate will, and they followed it to the letter, is about 38%, I think, thereabout.
That's good to know, and I know you've just been through this with the Minuteman, so I take what you say very strongly. My understanding from what I've been told is that because the number of building projects in towns that get invited in any given year is strictly limited and is a relatively low number, I believe, and I'm not going to quote the number because I'm going to be wrong, but it was a very low number of building plans were invited in the phase that we were invited in during, that actually speaks to the MSBA protecting its pie size very well. Now, what you say could very well be absolutely accurate. We were led to believe that because such a few number of building projects were brought in, that the MSBA has the funds to meet their obligations with the partnership. But if you've seen something different in your experience, your recent experience with Minuteman, then obviously that would lend very strong credence to your concerns. I would also say, though, that yes, 45% is absolute pie in the sky, best case scenario, and I would not expect us to end up at 45%, because even though a twin school is the agreed upon solution at this time, it is entirely possible that as we build out the twin school, you know, the library is not going to be doubled, but it's possible that some of the other shared spaces might not live in a strictly one space for twin school level. That's all I'm going to say on that topic.
Other question? Dave?
And this question might be more for Bob, but I'm just curious what the senior population's receptivity is to the large capital spend towards the school system.
It's all you, Bob. All kidding aside, we fully anticipate that this is going to be an uphill climb. But I would also, I don't think we're at the phase where I can stand up and say, well, 100% that this has to be done, and here are the reasons why. But I would definitely strongly say that the truth is, the main industry of this town is indeed the educational system, and I think if we put that into jeopardy, then we do run the risk of having a larger systemic problem versus a specific segment of the population that is on a fixed income and is not going to be receptive to an increase in taxes during the override.
Bob, would you like to address the question that was addressed to you?
I think in general, the senior population would be supportive in the last analysis. I think the schools now, in terms of the programs they offer and the requirements imposed by the state, are so different from when those of us who are seniors had children in the Acton schools, that a good bit of education is necessary to indicate why this is necessary. I mean, all you have to do is look at the last regional budget and you see all kinds of people there that were never employed when my children were in school. Admittedly, the dinosaurs were there, but not much else. And so I think the main problem from the senior perspective is on the diminution of the 45% rate. In other words, if you say, well, you really need this gym to be 20% bigger, and you need the library to be 15% bigger, and you need this, that, and the other, and so forth, and the rate that you could have had was 45 and goes down to 36.3, then you may very well find a lot of senior opposition. But if one doesn't stray too far from what MBSA, since I think most seniors are going to think what the state thinks is necessary is probably excessive. And so if you go beyond what the state wants, that's, I think, where you would have your problem. But the town has been supportive of the schools over the years quite well, and I think that they would continue to be. So I wouldn't worry about that unless the school parents want too much glitz. But all you have to do is go back to the public safety building, and you'll see exactly the same thing, where glitz lost because they didn't want to pay for it.
Other questions? Yeah, Dave?
Yeah, just a follow-up is, I mean, if I think about it, is like what sort of seniors are involved in the process. There's a school committee, and it sounds like there's some surveys being done, and typically the people who respond to surveys who have the most direct interest in it. And historically, the town has been supportive of the schools, but that's from like an operating budget perspective where, it's teachers' salaries and this, that, and the other. But then if the number could vary that we need to spend on capital and it's 50 million or 150 million, I think that may be a different experience for them, particularly if it's been a while since there's been a large project, and particularly that they've gotten older, their kids have gotten older since that time. There just could be more resistance, so it might be wise to have some of them involved in some portion of the process, and just so that there is greater awareness of what's going on and people aren't blindsided saying, whoa, what is this?
Absolutely, but you can only push so hard, right? I mean, one of the outreach programs was held specifically at the Council on Aging for the specific purpose of trying to reach that audience. And a similar one was done in Boxborough, specifically trying to reach that audience. I can say that I know that the flyers went out, the calls were made, the trying to rustle up interest in coming to these presentations was quite high, but it doesn't mean you can force people to go to these and announce their opinion. As for trying to have people on the building committee, I know they were looking for a cross-section. One of the things that I've continuously said on the DMPRC has been, you can't look at this strictly from the school's perspective. You have to look at this from the town's perspective. For example, one of the plans was to remove the triple school right from the start, and I said, you can't do that. You have to keep at least one and done option on the table. Unfortunately, that did not carry the day. So am I personally very afraid that only 288 people out of 35,000 residents of the combined towns responded? Yes, I'm very concerned about that. Do I think this is going to be an uphill battle? Yes, absolutely. I do believe it will be an uphill battle. But at the same time, we did everything we could to reach out, short of shanghaiing people and saying you must sit and watch this presentation.
I'll make a comment. The meeting that I went to, besides JD and Ray Altieri and Dr. Brolin, there's probably 5 of us in the audience. I mean, it was a Sunday night at 7:30, but
Yeah.
and it was at Sargent Library. But you would figure there would have been a lot more people,
I agree.
and it didn't happen.
How many different places did you see that sign, or how many times did it show up in your Facebook feed or on the web pages of the school?
Or of emails and everything else. I mean,
And on Twitter?
Yeah, and it was in with Judy being in PTSO at McCarthy Town, being the assistant chair. It was in the Howler. It was, it was well publicized.
So your eyeballs were on it, what, 6, 7, 8 times?
Maybe even more.
Okay,
But-
and 6 people showed up?
6 people showed up.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
outreach is a bitch.
it was pretty sad, and they all complain that, this is not adequate, this is not adequate. But they don't show up. And I think it's the same, look at town meeting. How many people show up at town meeting?
Oh, I do fully anticipate that there will be there will be a multiple of people showing up to the December work town meeting that showed up for the April meeting.
When you get to the December meeting, when you get to the December town meeting, it's going to be packed.
When it comes to spending money, people show up at town meeting. Now, how much money is going to be asked for at the December town meeting?
We don't know, but I would say you should expect between 1 and 1.5 million.
Okay. And how long does this design phase last? In other words, when does the real money get requested?
I don't have a solid answer for that. I'm sorry, I don't have a solid answer. I believe it's supposed to be under 12 months, but can I get back to you with a firmer answer on that?
Sure. Okay, any other questions on this one? If not, we'll move on to the municipal third quarter report. Go, Brian.
You have the clicker? What do you think, you need Twitter? Does it clicker? I thought you need Twitter like Donald Trump.
Well, that doesn't...
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the FinCom. So tonight I'll be presenting the Q3 results of FY17. So just please note that this is just kind of a summary form of the data that we typically put on the town's website. So you'll see that. If it's not there this evening, you'll see it in a couple of days or so. So I can tell you just kind of big picture, we're actually in financially pretty good shape right now, no major concerns. I'll get into a little more of the details, but we did have a snow and ice deficit despite a relatively quiet year as far as snow and snowstorms, but we had a lot of ice storms, and those have a tendency to consume a lot of our sand and salt, which really created the deficit this year. And we anticipate that deficit to be about $125,000. But in big picture, we're in pretty good shape, so let's get into the details. So if you look at the revenue side of the picture, we went to town meeting with a ALG consensus and a balanced plan of $86.7 million budget net of free cash, which was another $2.4 million. Year-to-date results are 66.7% of revenues, so we've collected about 77%. 3/4 of the year, our target is 75, so we're ahead of the game. So the details of the total revenue breakout, as you see below here, in property tax, which is the bulk of it, 79.5%. Year-to-date, we've collected 60.3. We're tracking right where we need to be at 76%. State aid's a small component, the 1.5. We collected 1.2. We're ahead of the game at 80%. MSBA, formerly known as SBAB, we have a contribution of $900,000+. We received all that money year-to-date. Local receipts, if you look at this, it's kind of interesting. We're trending at close to 90%, so we're doing pretty good in this category, and I think this is primarily, again, due to the construction industry is doing pretty good right now. It's pretty solid. We're still seeing a lot of permits, which is really driving that number. We received most of the motor vehicle in this third quarter, and so you get the big bump in this number right here, 4.3. We've really seen that leveling out now. We're not seeing that increasing like we were the last few years. I think we've estimated it, and it's kind of plateauing, so I'm not sure if we'll see a whole lot of movement there. But big picture, on the revenue side of the house, we're certainly looking pretty good. We're ahead of the game, and it's good news. The meals... Well, it's interesting. Last year was the first year of the meals tax, and we fell a little bit short of what we had anticipated. I think we had estimated about 270 or so. I think it ended up coming in around 230, 240. But I think we had a slow start. That first quarter last year, we were anticipating about $60,000, $70,000 a quarter. That first quarter came in at about half that. I don't know if it's because it was new and it was just people getting, I'm not sure, but it was a very soft opening, if you would. But now, Mike, we're trending at that higher level, at that 260, 270. So we do a pretty good job at supporting the local restaurants. So moving on to the expenditure side of the house. So if you look here, the town's operating budget was $32,247,000. The year-to-date actual, $25,186,183. So we've expended about 78%. Again, at a target of 75, we're not doing too bad. One of the things that you have to keep in mind here, and I've stressed it in the past, that we do have a PO system. So if we have monthly bills that we're aware of, electric, gas, oil, so on and so forth, and we know we're going to have that regular monthly bill, we put a blanket PO out there. We put a blanket PO to cover that. Oh, I really clicked ahead. And so that accounts for some of that 3% number. So we look at that, as you know, the finance department. We meet with the big three on a regular basis, so police, fire, and highway, just to see if there's anything that jumps out and that might catch us off track. So we feel comfortable with the numbers. So that's really it for general fund. I just want to, again, mention that snow and ice deficit we'll cover, and we're going to do that within the operations. That's the one deficit. As most of you probably know, that under state law, you can roll that deficit over to the following year. Where Manager Ledoux has a bottom line budget, he has the ability to shut down some operations and cover some of these deficits. There's no sense of kicking it down the road into the next fiscal year if you can cover it this year, so that's what our plan is. We're also anticipating a small deficit in the legal line in the manager's budget. We had some And you're most familiar with it, church versus state situation with CPA monies here in the congregational church across the street. So we know that was being litigated, and it's been brought, I think it's put before the SJC now, and I think that hearing is going to start up in September. So it has settled down somewhat, but that certainly spiked our legal line, and so we do expect a deficit there as well. So moving on to enterprise funds, we have 5 of them. As you all know, these are kind of little mini businesses within our operations. They have statutory constraints. You can't not spend what town meeting has approved as a budget. So it's really the department heads that really oversee these do a pretty good job at making sure that they don't go over those spending levels, even if their revenues aren't where they anticipated. Most of them do have pretty decent fund balances, so worst case scenario, they can spend some of that fund balance, but in any case, they cannot spend what their total operating budget was approved of at town meeting. So first on the list here, we have septage. This budget usually always comes in within its range and less. They get a budget approved at town meeting of $138,650. Their collections right now are a little light, 61.7%, so not trending really where we want to be. Their expenses, however, are a little light as well. But if you look at that straight up P&L, they are running a small deficit right here. We still got another quarter to go. Not a lot of concern here. If you look, they got a healthy fund balance as of 6/30, $169,000. And they do a nice job at usually settling this in right where it should. So we don't anticipate a problem here at all. Next would be Transfer Station and Recycling Fund. This is the second year of the new program of the pay-as-you-throw program. If you look, the budget was really designed around the former budget numbers. So the trending of the revenue looks pretty good at 75.2%, but if you look at the expense side, he's only trending at 51.4 at 3/4 of the year. Well, a lot of this is due to the fact that the recycling program has limited the amount of trash now going to a transfer station, and that was all contractual service. So the haulers would come in, haul that, and they charge us for that. Well, if we're producing less trash, we have less expense. So that's where you're going to see that significant drop is right there in that line. So right now, if you look at their P&L, they get right now they're trending really well, and they're in good shape. Town meeting also authorized the support of $175,000 from retained earnings. We only use that if we need it. There's no sense of even moving it into the revenue lines if you're not going to need it, but it is there as a resource if we have to spend it. And again, he has a pretty good, healthy fund balance as of June 30th of 16 of $343,000.
So does that mean that they're actually running almost $400,000 to $377,000 in the better category than was originally budgeted at the time of the last annual town meeting? Because since they're not touched, so that 175 is not part of the 848 number, correct?
The 175 is in the 848,
Is or is
Jason.
not?
It's not in the 637. We don't recognize that on day one like a general fund subsidy.
But it is in the 848?
It is in the 848,
okay,
correct.
So you can't count it over and above. Thank you.
Yeah. So moving on to the sewer fund. As you all know, this is sewer betterments and your sewer O&M, so there's really 2 major components to this. So we do quarterly betterments on the tax bills, so every quarter that's issued with the tax bill. That's a major component. That piece of it is actually funding the debt service. And then also we have the O&M, and the O&M is really for the operations and maintenance. We have the sewage treatment plant down in South Acton. We contract that out. That contract's a little over $500,000 a year, and then there's some other pass-through costs. So the total fund is really comprised of the debt service, the contract for the sewage treatment plant, and some other incidental costs. So the $1,762,541 was approved at town meeting. The year-to-date expense is $1,175,641, about 67%. And then right now the revenue is $1,171,641. We're trending a little light. That's primarily due to we have a capital assessment that we send to the schools. They don't get a betterment charge. They don't pay interest. like the town. So we send out capital assessments once a year. It's about a $184,000 bill. That's got sent out after Q3 results. It got sent out in April. We've since got that in the House, so that would bump that number. This fund actually always runs in a positive. And then also the expenses, if you look at this and saying, well, Brian, you've already spent pretty much all your budget and you're 3/4 of the year through. Again, the bulk of the budget is that debt service. We have 2 debt service payments, one in August, one in February. So we have 2 interest payments and a principal payment. So again, they weren't in Q2 results, but it's all in Q3 results, and it's not linear, so you get that one-time bump. So that's the bulk of the expense there. And also Woodard Incurrence contracts, obviously an annual contract. On day one, they encumber all that money, that budget line for the contract, because they know they're going to spend it. So that's all showing up in that expense line. And they also have a healthy fund balance of over $1 million. So no concerns there. So moving on down to the ambulance fund. So town meeting approved a budget of $785,000. The year-to-date revenues are $511,012. I will point out, Jason, and this is kind of what you were, I think, talking about, it does include, or it does not include, again, the retained earnings. We only use this if we need it. If there's no need for this, we do not move it into this line as a revenue. It's only there as a backup, kind of as a reserve. So right now, they're trending at a pretty good level, 65%. It's not our targeted 75. The expenses, however, are at the level of where they should be, 78, 75%. So they are running a loss here. So that's why we have this retained earnings, because we knew going into this that we're going to have a loss. So what happened here, historically, if you guys remember, we always had about a general fund subsidy of about $200,000. When we first initially created the ambulance enterprise, it was about $271,000. We had slowly dropped it. It had a significant fund balance of about $1 million. So in this particular year, we're having some budgetary constraints, and we felt as if the ambulance fund could use some of that retained earnings to fund the budget. And if you recall that this year at town meeting, we actually put that subsidy back in it because we need it. So, and part of the expense line here too, as you all know, starting this July 1st, we'll go in ALS. And you're saying, no, we do ALS already in town. Well, we do, but we contract it out. We're bringing an ALS service into town, so we have to get our guys prepped. There was some added costs associated with that. But again, we can't go over that budget cap of 785, 535, but we do have the retained earnings to default to, so we're going to be fine there.
To the best of your knowledge, and I know this is not your bailiwick per se, but to your best of your knowledge, are we on target and on track for July 1st, or are there going to be any hiccups with the ALS service as of July 1?
I believe that is the plan, and that we have not deviated from that plan, and I know we check periodically with the chief, and he's full steam ahead for July 1 target date.
Okay, thank you.
And next on the line here, I believe this is our final, is the Transportation Enterprise Fund. So we went to town meeting asking for a budget of $556,288. I wish I could do this with every other fund, because we're trending, at least the revenue side, at 101% at 3/4 of the year through. However, I do want to bring to your attention, though, we did have a general fund subsidy of $245 and a transfer of $116,288 from the commuter lot fund into the transportation fund. So that is in this number right here. So if you net these two out, which is about $360, the year-to-date revenues are about $200, excluding the general fund subsidy and the commuter lot parking. Again, I mean, it shows a profit of $210. We're 3/4 of the year, through the year. We don't anticipate any problems here with the Transportation Enterprise Fund. We think it's going to settle in just where we want it. And that would be the end of Q3 results.
Thank you, Brian. Questions for Brian? Jason?
Could you explain to me a little about what went on with the firefighters? I saw a Facebook post about there being unhappiness, and then I saw a Facebook post later saying all was resolved. Can you shed some light on that for me, please?
Well, I can tell you what I know, so.
That's all we can expect.
Janet may know some more, I don't know, but I can at least I'll tell you what I know. So, as I said, we meet on a regular basis with the big three, so police, fire, and highway. They're the largest budgets. And so we meet on a regular basis, and we do extrapolations of what does their budget look like, and how are they trending. And so, we noticed that in the fire department that some of the expenses were trending on the high side, and we were a little concerned that they were going to be going over their budget. So we asked them if they could take a look at it. And in fairness to the fire department, they've had some injuries, they've had some retirements and some people leaving, so they've had some shortfall there. And frankly, they're a 24/7 operation. They need to staff. They can't have one guy on a fire truck or one guy in an ambulance. Obviously, they need to partner up. And again, I'll tell you what I know. So there were some concerns here that they were going to be going over budget, and frankly, we knew we had a snow and ice deficit. We knew we had a legal deficit. There were some other concerns. We didn't know we were trying to pull all the pieces together, so we just asked them to slow down a little bit. And I think that's really where the concern was with the firemen is with running light, so to speak. And they under contract, I believe that they like 10 guys on a shift, they'll go down to 9 guys, or they can run even with 8. And I don't know if the chief, again, probably don't have the numbers right, but he was asking them maybe to run even lighter than that. I'm not even sure, but they had some personal concerns of public safety issues. And we told them that we needed to continue to look at this budget before we could, give them the green light. We had Manager Ledoux has budget constraints. He's got a bottom line budget. He has to stay within that bottom line budget. So we had to look at everything. And at the same time, I believe that the chief was out on a medical issue. We had a new deputy. There's a lot of things going on. So I think a lot of it might have been some communication. I think when the dust settled, we looked at the numbers. Overall, total town operating budget, as well as the fire department's budget specifically, the numbers were settling in a little bit better and coming in a little bit better. So we felt, comfortable letting them go back to full staff or to full levels of operation. And I think that's where it kind of ended up. I'm not sure what all the details were out there and what was hitting papers or news or whatever. I didn't read it, so I'm not sure, but that's kind of my knowledge of it.
Other questions? Brian, as we sit at the end of the third quarter, actually, we're well into the fourth quarter at this point. Where do you think we'll wind up at the end of the fiscal year in terms of turnbacks? Do you think the number we've been planning on in the ALG is good? Do you think it might be better than that? Do you think it might be worse than that?
Well, I can tell you right now, in the budget, we don't anticipate, at a maximum maybe of a 1% turn back, so maybe 300,000. On the other side, you can see we're beating our revenue projections. Would have to take a look at that, Steve. I know right now ALG has a replenishment, I think, of 900,000 on the town side. That's our target. I think based on the revenue projections, as you saw, we're pretty good. We are going to have a small turn back. And then the other piece are the statutory adjustments, the deficits that you carry on the book that State Department of Revenue hits you for. You can run certain lines into a deficit knowing that you have monies coming in, but sometimes they hit you a free cash number on those. Some grants and so on and so forth, they allow you, Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, they allow you to run it into a deficit, but they also reduce your free cash for that.
Okay. So, as you no doubt are aware, there'll be a December 4th special town meeting, and money will be requested. Our normal schedule is that we barely know where we came in from the last fiscal year by December 4th. What are our options for getting a fairly hard estimate of where the year came in, say as early as September?
Yeah, I think the goal would be to get the auditor in beforehand and get our free cash certified. If the intent is to spend some free cash at town meeting, obviously we have to have that certified. We do have a stabilization fund that does not need to be certified, but our goal is to have that certification of free cash
The
done.
recollection is that would take a 2/3 vote to use the stabilization fund?
It would need a 2/3 vote.
I don't think I want to go there.
Right.
So-
Right, right.
So whatever you guys can do to get us a good hard estimate of what we're dealing with as soon as possible, it's going to be pretty important, because what's going to be talked about in December is not just the $1.5 million in design funds. It's going to be the kind of the whole fiscal future of the next 20 years.
Right.
So we're going to need the best data we can possibly get as early as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve, what do you need to tend to use free cash? What is the vote to use free cash? Is that just a majority vote?
That's just a majority, if we have it, and it's certified.
Well, you have it, yeah.
So, when I sent out the agenda, I attached the school's third quarter report. If you have any questions, just funnel them back to me, and I will send them on to Claire and see if I can get answers before she retires on June 30th. Committee assignments. So far, what I have is for ALG, Acton Leadership Group, it's myself and Jason. Bob, I'm assuming you're doing Health Insurance Trust. Shu has graciously offered to continue doing the Board of Selectmen. I accepted rapidly.
With open arms.
Jason, you and I have been doing school committee. I'm not going to go to every school committee meeting this year. Do you still want to be involved? Do you want to have another person assigned?
I would like a second person assigned. I will go when I can, but since I definitely want to stay on the school building, school building committee, which I did manage to finagle a nomination for and get approved of last night, I would like to, I definitely want to go to as many of them as I can, but I would love it if somebody else could help share the duties and we could tag team, make sure that at least one person is present at each of them.
All right, I'm looking for volunteers.
Can I volunteer as a non-voting member? Okay,
can-
I would volunteer for that.
You can certainly do work for the committee as an associate. Thank you for volunteering.
Thank you. No, I'll make it easy.
Okay, Roland, you're doing CPC again.
Got it.
Mike, you're still on Minuteman? And the Walker property, or whatever they call that committee?
Main Street Capital Plan.
Okay. I'm still doing the Town Capital Committee. Dave, is SATSAC still active? Okay. Do you still want to do it, or? Okay. 2020, is that still active? Was Margaret doing that one? Or were you doing that one? All right, then I'll hold that one.
If it comes back, are you willing to do it?
Sure. Okay, so I need a volunteer for Economic Development Committee, because Doug was doing that and I've been doing it for 10 years or so. So, what does that committee do? Economic Development, John. I think Selby, the land use director guy, is pretty involved, and a lot of the guys, local business, Chamber of Commerce, and basically they're there to help promote business interest within the town. It's okay. I also need a volunteer for West Acton Sewer.
Everybody's step back while David sits still.
You and Dave were both interested in West Acton Sewer, which I was incredibly surprised at. I seldom get two volunteers for anything to do with a sewer. Does anybody have a coin?
I got a €2 piece.
All right, Mike, you can do. I also got Kelly's Corner up for bid, guys, if you... I think so, yeah. Yeah, that's what well. Okay.
There are 3 meetings in the last year for 2020, so I have all the number of meetings if anybody is interested.
Wait a minute. All right, Dave, you're on West Acton Sewer, and at the moment, nobody's going on 2020 because I potentially have 2 new members coming on board. So. And John, you got Kelly's Corner. All right, thank you. That was relatively painless. We need again, because the year is somewhat truncated because of the December 4th special town meeting, we need to get busy on our point of view. I am appointing a working group of Jason, Shuyu, and Roland to be a drafting committee. And your first task, gentlemen, is to come up with a list of topics that you believe we ought to take a position on or cover in this year's point of view.
When do you need that list back?
When's our next meeting?
That's what I thought the answer was going to be, but I had to ask.
I believe it's in 2 weeks' time. June 13th.
3 weeks. Got an extra week.
Yeah, you did. You got lucky.
Excellent.
And for the rest of your homework is, I know we saw a lot of numbers thrown out. Most of them seem to be around 200 million on school projects. Well, that's kind of like asking every man, woman, and child in this town for $10,000. For a family of 5 like Christine, that's 50. That used to be a college education when I was a kid, but now it's about a year. So start thinking about it in terms of $10,000 for every man, woman, and child. And if you were going to go around the neighborhood asking for that kind of money, what questions would you expect people to have, and how would you answer them? All right. Do we have any minutes?
I have nearly all of them complete, so I can bring them to the next meeting. But I don't have them today.
I didn't want to do minutes. Committee reports? Shuyu.
Since our last meeting, there were 3 Board of Selectmen meetings on the 8th, the 15th, and 22nd. So there are 5 things I'd like to report. Number 1 is the state budget. For our town warrant, we have some projection for the 18th. That's essentially based on the governor's budget. And then now we have the House Ways and Means. And then Senator Eldridge and Representative Benson attended the Board of Selectmen meeting on the 8th. They provided an update. I also looked it up online at the DOE website. So the good news is that the numbers available so far are slightly better than our projection. Obviously, the caveat is that They have to go through the Senate, has to be conference, and then has to be signed. But as I said, the numbers are higher by a little bit, and so that's good news. So that's one. Number two is that this is because Jason asked. Last night, the town manager reported we hired 3 new firefighters. This is so that we can meet the deadline on July 1st.
Okay.
The third one is that the board has approved unanimously the insulate special permit. The next thing is that the Board of Selectmen held 3 executive sessions. One is about Concord litigation, and then 2 is about collective bargaining. There's nothing to report, but I thought it's probably good to know that those are in progress. One thing I'd like to bring out about the Concord litigation is that, as you recall, the permitted withdrawal rate is 1.5 million gallons per day. And historically, Concord has never withdrawn that amount year-round. And now the geological expert has determined that the safe withdrawal rate is actually half of the 1.5 million gallons. So that's very interesting. And the general consensus at the Board of Selectmen meeting expressed by the citizens is that they hope the Board of Selectmen will stand strong and then fight this battle. And the last thing is that for those of you who take T to Boston, they're going to add a couple, I believe 4 paid motorcycle parking spots at the South Acton station, in case anybody needs it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Buy a motorcycle there?
Dave? Oh, you have a question for Shu-Yu?
Is the rate going to be different? Maybe this is a Brian question. Is the rate going to be different for motorcycles versus cars?
If I remember right, it's going to be the same. So there are going to be 4 spots. The proposal at the meeting was that 2 will be reserved for the residents, and 2 will be for other people. So as you know, for the parking spot for residents is slightly lower. And I don't remember the number because I don't park there, but I think that's true. And then the meter rate is about $5 per day.
$5 per day,
yeah, if I remember correctly.
Shu-Yu, do you know if the Board of Selectmen is considering whether to apply for CPC funds for the River Street property that the town used free cash money for?
I didn't hear that. I'm sorry, Jenna, do you have any more information you could add? Thank you.
It will probably be on a future agenda, but yeah, that is certainly something that we need to discuss.
I mean, that could be helpful for December 4th town meeting if we need to have some more cash at the town level available.
I'll throw this one over to Roland. An application for funding the CPC usually doesn't get funded or approved until February.
Correct. So there was a to segue into that whole thing, there was a meeting that I attended for CPC, not much to report, but one of the things was, well, why didn't the Walker property, why didn't that, not River, come up that CPC, why did it come to town meeting, and why wasn't that on the CPC funded that to buy the property? And CPC there was no application submitted for that for the last town meeting. So by their deadline, by their application deadline, because it wasn't closed until after that. So CPC, they were talking about that, possibly bringing it if an application was submitted or for anything else that they need to act on could be brought to the December 4th town meeting. And that was specifically more or less addressed at the River Street. And I said, when I was on the committee, we did bring one in one of the off cycles, and that was the Cowett property. And that was brought to the special town meeting in the fall as well. So it's not unprecedented that that might not that would happen so long as they get the application the town works with CPC to bring it to the special town meeting.
All right.
And then they could also decide that they want to rent and hold it till the spring one anyway, but that is an option.
School committee met, but I was on vacation. Obviously, something happened.
So I will admit I was not there live. I do not have any further insight into what's going to be said tomorrow night. I would suggest that tomorrow is going to be a very interesting one for us all to watch.
Really?
Is it going to be broadcast on ActonTV tomorrow night?
I believe it is.
My understanding is that it is, yes.
How many of you may attend?
Mr. Chairman, there's one of the seniors in town sends around a personal newsletter telling seniors of all kinds of interesting things that are happening or not happening. And her reference with regard to tomorrow's school committee meeting was it was going to be taped. Other places I've seen it going to be broadcast, so I'm not sure whether you're going to be able to watch it tomorrow night or not.
Can we ask the ActonTV person if she knows?
How many of you may attend?
Hey, looks like we're getting an answer.
Yes. It's a
It's going
thumbs
to be
up.
broadcast. Real-time feedback, gotta love it.
Well, I was planning on attending, but we're having our Main Street meeting tomorrow at the same time.
All right, so hold your hands up again. 1, 2,
No, my wife's attending. I think you're kidding.
I can't.
okay, 3. All right, then we're good. I would caution you to don't sit together. Don't discuss nor deliberate while you're there.
We're having a citizens meeting about that tonight. So there is some momentum building in the community.
There's an online petition with nearly 1,000 signatures. You know, I mean, it's. But I don't have anything I can share. Actually, that sounds like I know something. I don't know anything more than anybody else. All right, at your positions, I left schedule for the remainder calendar 2017. We are down to 7 full members, so if you know you're not going to be here on one of these dates, let me know so that if we can't get a quorum on a particular night, I will cancel the meeting. Hopefully, we'll get some new members soon. Yes, sir.
Can't you appoint an associate member for that night to be a full voting member?
I cannot.
I thought that was in the bylaw that you could.
It doesn't apply to this committee.
Okay.
Question along those lines. What constitutes a quorum? 4 voting members or 4 members?
4 voting members.
Okay.
When we're full strength, 5. All right, any other business to come before the committee? Yes, John.
Just on a school side update. Joanne Campbell, the high school principal, announced yesterday that she is a finalist for the assistant superintendent for curriculum in Arlington. That position opened when their curriculum assistant got the Groton-Dunstable superintendency. So you may have some, real chaos. Well, maybe it's time for the good old boys to come back, Bill Ryan and Steve Donovan, and...
Bill Ryan is available now. He was the interim Groton-Dunstable superintendent. So. All right, if there's no further business before the committee, Christine, the newest member, has one duty. and that's to move to adjourn.
Step up.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. What do you